Well, starting out with the Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One, we like to do a little recap of the episode. So if you haven't caught up, or maybe you forgot what happened, we do that little brief recap, and then we cut it out as a separate piece of content before going into our full discussion. So if you're watching just that recap, down in the description, we're going to have the link to the full episode, so you can check that out. But having said that, this was episode 7, Kahuna. Big Kahuna? Or just Kahuna?
I think it was just Kahuna, but do you remember
Okay.
Big Kahuna?
No, what was that?
It's like a water park in Destin. I don't know if you ever went there.
It was like stuck in my head. I was like, Big Kahuna. And so basically this episode opens up with the party meeting Moro, and basically
wait, I thought I was the first half.
Oh, you're the first half? Oh, sorry. You go ahead.
No, are you good though? Like, we can switch. Okay.
No, we're good. Yeah. I totally didn't rewatch the first half this morning to make sure I knew it. So you're good.
Are you sure? Because we can.
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Okay. All right. So yeah, as Blake was saying, we pick up back with the crew in the Tower of the Scepter's Chorus, where Suvi has just been given this like grand, warm welcoming. Moro again mentions that he is a big fan of Suvi's parents, and even says that he has a collection of their works. More on that a little bit later in the episode. But Moro says, before any business, let's get you fed and tended to, and then basically leads them towards this like grand dining hall. As they're on the way, Moro asks Suvi about Ame and Ursulon, being like, who are your traveling companions? How did you come to, be with them? What are you guys up to? And Suvi doesn't really want to answer him, so instead she does a bit of an intimidation check and is successful. So Moro's like, let's get you some food first. So they arrive at the dining hall, and it's like, this beautiful setup with all these enchanted magical chairs that are basically just like these floating chairs. Ursulon is fascinated with them, but Ame kind of has this interesting, I don't know if it was like an insight check or what it was, but Ame has this moment where she is kind of like turned off or even kind of repulsed at this use of magic. I think she even says it's almost vulgar to her. Yeah. Just this like, being a witch, magic to her is like for utility and like helping people, and not not just like this extravagant show of useless, to make a floating chair. But so they sit down, and then these plates of food just telekinetically like float out toward them, and they start to eat. But these are like fancy mage dishes, and Ursulon, does not have proper etiquette or manners. So Suvi is trying to kind of like subtly teach him how to eat each thing. And Moro kind of clocks this happening. But Ame clocks Moro clocking that. And so she then kind of similarly like pretends not to know how to eat things and is very like uncivilized to try to like kind of help cover. So as they're eating, they ended up like kind of finishing through, and Moro asks, so what can the Scepter's Chorus do for you? And he kind of asks again, like, why are you here? Basically, what are you up to? And Suvi says that, Archmage Silence basically sent me on this walkabout of the Empire so that I can like learn the culture and get more experience so that, I can better serve the people. She rolls a deception check on this with a self-imposed disadvantage, and I think rolls like a 6. And so, he's not really buying it. But Ame chimes in and is like, yeah, I'm the only witch of Toma, and I too am on a walkabout. And she rolls a nat 1 on her deception.
Of course.
Yeah, and Moro's like, you're the only witch from Toma. Like, I'm familiar with another witch. And Ame's like, oh, yeah, well, Grandmother Ren, she actually passed away. So he offers his condolences and says, he only knew of her by reputation, but he had gotten a brief. When he was hired to this position, he kind of got the breakdown on all the local powerful hedge mages and powerful people around, and Grandmother Rin was one of them. He says, but, not as like a threat or because she was an enemy or anything, just because, she was powerful. And they insight check this, and he seems to be telling the truth, but Suvi knows a lot more than like just the general people might know about this, and thinks that Moro must just not realize how powerful or important Rin really was. So then Moral wants to know about Ursulon, where he's from, what he's doing, and he says he's from Silbury. He's the strongest man in Silbury, in fact. And so to showcase this, there's this hilarious moment where he tries to lift this table, which is like several tons, can't do it. So Moro like telekinetically lifts over a chest and is like, "Try this," and he tries to lift that, can't do it. So then he starts like taking out silverware, tries to lift it, fails again, and
Yeah,
then finally like
so
rips
good.
everything out of it and finally is able to lift it. It was great. Um,
So good. It's so funny.
it really was. Then Ame asks, like, "Hey, can you show us around the city? Like, teach us about what's going on here?" And Moro says, "Yes. In fact, he's been at work, or they've been at work, but he has been working on something very special here." And Ame's like, "Oh, is it the thing in the ocean?" And like his eyes go wide, and he's like, "You're very observant." And he's like, "Yes, the lights out in the ocean are a culmination of more than a decade of study, observation, and research, and feats of magic from yours truly. 4 or 5 years ago, the Crown gave permission for construction to begin, and so I'd be more than happy to give you a tour of the work we've done since then. This is something, or there is something here in Port Talon that we found that I believe is of true arcane importance and significance." And as he says all this, Suvi and but basically Ame and Ursulon as well all realize that Moro looks at Suvi as like his big shot, like his big chance to make it in with the people that matter. Um, this is essentially like his life's work, and he believes what he's been working on could really like
Yeah.
set him off. But he then tells him that like it's more impressive at nighttime. So like take a few hours, get comfortable, and then I'll give you a tour later. And as he's saying this, another mage actually comes into the dining hall wearing all red, and we come to find out this is the wizard Pain, the one they are looking for. And he tells Moro like, "Hey, I need to talk to you about the budgets." And Moro's like, "Hey, after dinner, I'll talk to you in a little bit." But then he turns to the group and it says, "Let me show you guys to your rooms. And we'll meet later tonight to go on this tour." And that's where I will toss it off to you, my friend.
So we had a little internet issues, so we had to pause for a second. Sorry. Picking up from my half, the party's sent off to their rooms. Suvi speaks with Moro for a second, and Moro is very much concerned about, hey, your hired help, your bodyguard, not quite as strong as I would hope. Are you okay? Are you going to be safe? And Suvi's basically like, "It's okay. I'm on a special mission. These people have been handpicked. It's okay." And Moro says he doesn't want to pry, but essentially there's some kind of check that I can't remember if it was a roll or not, but essentially Suvi realizes that Moro knows she's not being forthcoming, that there's some suspicion there, not necessarily in a nefarious way, but that Moro's kind of clocking like, okay, there's something happening here.
Yeah.
Despite this, Suvi's like, "Hey, I want to see what you have for my parents." And Suvi is led off to a library where she's given a book, a collection of sorts from her parents. During this conversation, also, Pain is going to appear again, still looking sad, and is basically like, "Hey, can you sign this budget?" And Suvi more basically says, like, "Do you have anything to say to our esteemed guest?" And Pain is basically like, "Hi," and goes back to Moro, not giving her at all the acclaim that Moro gave her. Suvi, I can't remember if there was if there was a check or not with it, but Aabria basically plays Suvi with like this moment of suaveness of like, I have found paperwork and budgets to be, but then she can't think of what to say to finish it, and so she's like, "So I just stopped talking," and Pain and Moro like, "Okay." It's just a great moment. Despite this, Pain leaves having his budget signed, and Suvi basically is like, "That guy's a jerk. He's really rude." And Moro is like, it's a real shame people who've seen the glory of the Citadel that they would be so devoted to budgets and paperwork instead of like the bigger things that we're trying to do. Despite this, Suvi, she says her goodbye, goes back to her room, and decides, let's get the party together because we need to figure out what's happening to essentially, basically, eventually get to Wavebreaker. So she goes to Ursulon's room, And Ursulon answers the door, covered in sweat. Furniture's all been moved in his room, where he's been clearly trying to prove himself to be strong. She collects him, goes to Ame's room. Ame is trying to get the fox to take a bath, which the fox is like, I don't even know what this is, and I don't want to do it. And it's basically like, all right, guys, we gotta figure out what we're gonna do here. So they talk about what should we do about Pain. And they're like, maybe we should just turn him in, like just out him and turn him in. And the party's like, well, if we do that, Will Gallows will likely kill him. So maybe we shouldn't do that. And essentially they decide, you know what? I think we need to get more information on Pain. Ursulon can go invisible. How about he and the fox can sneak off to Pain's room, and the rest of us will kind of create a distraction. So they step out of the room together, and they are invited on a tour immediately. Like people who are like, oh, hey, like, are you looking to go on a tour? And Suvi's like, yes, actually, we are. Meanwhile, as they're on their tour, Ursulon very awkwardly says, I need to go to the bathroom. And Moro, I can't remember if it was Moro, it was just a wizard in general, but keeping in trend with the whole episode of these wizards being surprised, or mages being surprised at the awkwardness of Suvi's friends, is like, okay, sure, go right ahead to the bathroom, I guess. So Ursulon and the fox sneak off. Suvi and Ame are shown to this warehouse where there are these large, these massive barrels of, Brennan described it as like basically salt, but like of like a sickly green color to it that's being poured into these large containers. And these are essentially supposed to be taken to the wall, the large wall that's been erected in town. They also see, I think it was like wands or some kind of devices that the mages describe as being important for affecting current. And something, there was like a line about how like great magic can happen when there's enough of a current or something like that. I don't know if you remember like how it was.
They had
described.
like these big aquariums, and mages were testing wands in them just because like 1 in 100 has like a special property that like enables them to control like currents in water.
Yeah. Meanwhile, from that, Ursulon is sneaking off to Pain's office. And in sneaking into Pain's very small 8x8 office, Pain is there and immediately spots Ursulon, who's not invisible. And Ursulon's like, hi. And Pain's like, hello. And Ursulon basically is just immediately puts his cards down and is like, Suvi wants to speak to you. Where Pain is kind of like, why? Like, what do you mean? And Lou is very much like, I didn't want to be in the situation, and yet here I am. And is like, he basically just says like, hey, we know. And Pain's like, you know what? And he name drops Will Gallows, to which Pain immediately stands up, and Brennan reveals that Pain in this moment is either thinking about basically coming with Ursulon and figuring out what does Suvi know, or just outright killing Ursulon. He has Ursulon roll a luck check for high or low. He rolls a 6, and immediately Pain stands up, pulls out a dagger, cuts himself, and drops the dagger, and basically says like, oh no, you've cut me, or something like that. Basically claiming self-defense, and prepares to electrify Ursulon. Meanwhile, Ame is messaging the fox being like, hey, how's it going? And the fox is like, we're here, we're in the room. And that's basically where the episode ends. So episode 7, Kahuna of The Wizard, the Witch, and the Wild One. And again, if you're watching just the recap, you can watch our full discussion. It's linked in the description. So yeah,